Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Audietis. This episode of Nos Audietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Audietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Lodero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going to
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Porter says, cheated!
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome to another episode of Nos Audietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Tuesday, March 26, 2024. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. We are now 4 games into the season, roughly 12% through. Things could hardly be going worse for the Seattle Sounders. Following Saturday's gut-wrenching loss in which they erased a 2-goal deficit only to fall back behind on the ensuing kickoff, they are now winless. Their offense has managed to score 4 goals, but 3 of those are from the penalty spot. Their defense, the presumed strength of the team, is coming off a game in which they allowed 3 goals to a team that had not even scored 2 in a game since last September. And while they're slowly getting some of their injured starters back, it seems like every week someone else goes down. The latest one was Leo Chu, who we just found out will be out 3 to 5 weeks with a torn knee tendon. He'll become the 7th Sounder to miss at least 2 games to injury this year, with fellow injured players João Paulo, Pedro de la Vega, Reed Baker-Whiting, and Bradilio Rodriguez all out for the foreseeable future as well. Aaron, I know it's early, but I ask you this only semi-tongue-in-cheek. Is it time to panic?
It's not super far from being time to panic. I don't feel like it's been very rough. And I think if these games were coming against the LAFCs of the world, the FC Cincinnati's of the world, Minnesota somehow, the Minnesotas of the world somehow, then it would be frustrating because those are the teams obviously you want to be keeping up with, but it would be a little easier to explain away of like, well, we got hit by all these injuries right at the start of the year, and these are good teams, but they're not. These aren't good teams that they're losing to.
Or not beating.
Or whatever. Yeah. It's San Jose, a very bad team that, I think that the injuries are an excuse for only getting a point, grinding out a draw on the road, right? Like that's the kind of result I think that you can say, look, we don't have our guys, right? We just got to do what we can do. That's not an excuse to lose to San Jose. It's not an excuse to lose the way they did. I think one of the most frustrating games in a really long time, because the timing of all 3 goals was just infuriating. You get the 2 where I think the Sounders looked decent, I think, up until San Jose's first goal. And then they just fall asleep, twice within 90 seconds. And then the third goal, a goal that is almost a cliche, to give up a goal right from the kickoff. But I can't recall, I'm sure it's happened, but I cannot recall the Sounders ever giving up a goal that quickly after scoring one themselves.
I don't know how many, I'm sure that's happened before. Like maybe it was even in the Portland game where they gave up a goal in quick succession like that, like 2 goals in a row in quick succession. And somehow that feels a little bit more like, okay, the momentum is, you get caught up in the momentum or whatever, and the ball's goes rolling downhill, and it sometimes it's tough to stop or whatever, right? But the goal they allowed at the end of the game is just mind-boggling in its ineptitude is probably the wrong word. It's just mind-boggling that a team that is supposed to be so defensively sound, that had a lot of veterans on the field at that time.
Yep.
That the momentum had completely gone in the Sounders' favor. The Earthquakes probably, I mean, you got to imagine, what was the feeling on their sideline? We're winless and we just gave up a 2-goal lead at home.
Yeah.
Like, they had to be in panic. They had to be pulling their hair out. And then you don't even make them stew in it for more than a minute. It was like 50 seconds or something like that after Musovski's shot hit the back of the net that San Jose went back ahead. I mean, it's just it's hard to swallow. It's hard to explain, and I would say that result, more than any of the previous results, is what has me a little bit more worried about the prospects of this team. And yet there were some positives in the game if you really feel like digging into it. But I don't know, maybe that's for later in the show. Because right now I'm just still struggling to process this. It was a really, really bad result. And in some ways, I want to say it was probably worse. I don't know. Was it better than a 0-0? If the game had ended 0-0, would that have been better?
Yeah, for me, it would have, because it's the same problems, right? It's we can't score goals.
Right.
And that is, I don't know. Now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe you want to see, okay, we lost this game, but it was an uncharacteristic defensive breakdown that's not going to be repeatable. And we scored a goal from the run of play. Maybe that makes you feel a little better. I don't know. But for me, given where it feels like the mindset of this club has to be, the mindset of the players, the vibes in general, I think having another crack form is a little more concerning for me. And yes, they scored 2 goals. Yes, they scored a goal from the run of play, but the first goal was a penalty that,
not deserved.
Not deserved. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. The second goal is a great goal, incredible ball, great header, but kind of came from nothing, even though the Sounders were pretty dominant.
It wasn't like some long buildup or something like that.
Yeah, it's not a chance. It's not a high percentage chance. Like, they're not going to be able to create a ton of goals that way, I don't think. So
right, yeah. Sure.
So I don't know. I'm trying not to be as negative as I'd like to be, I guess, because I want to keep an even keel here. But it's been a long time since I've been frustrated in that specific way after a Sounders game.
Yeah, there's been plenty of frustrating results over the years and more of them recently, but this is one of those ones that's really hard to sit in, I think, because of all the circumstances around it. Again, like, San Jose and I think that's what is really frustrating about this start, is that if they had just been okay, like not even good, they should have at least 5 more points. And if they're sitting on 7 points through 4 games, you're actually feeling fine. I mean, you're not maybe like excited about if they're playing, because they could be playing I guess my point is, they could have been playing the exact same way and be on 7 points. You just have a little turn here or there, and it's 7 points. Really, you get 7 points really quickly. You know, if one of Raul's shots against Austin goes in, there's 2 more points. If they just don't fall asleep on a free kick in the 88th minute, there's 2 more points right there against the Rapids. Right. If they just don't give up a goal right after scoring the equalizer, there's another point. So, it's easy to come up with these things, and that's what's so frustrating. And I don't know, we were looking at this team. I thought they had a decent shot at the Supporter Shield. I was convinced they were the favorites in the West. I don't know. I suppose it's early enough that they could still get into the West race, but I mean, they're basically out of the Supporter Shield race already.
Yeah, it's pretty much the polar opposite of last season, right? Where they had the best start in club history and just looked unbeatable for the first 7 games. And I have never seen them look this inept before. I don't feel like, or they've never looked more inept. I guess there have definitely been times where they've looked this bad for stretches, but this is as bad of a start to the season as I can remember, even worse than 2016, I think. 2022 was a sort of an outlier because the league wasn't going great, but CCL was happening and that was the focus. So yeah, it's a huge bummer, as you said, because as you said, coming in, I think the expectations were pretty high for a lot of people. And it's another one of these years, and this is a bigger deal, I think, to a lot of people than it is to me. But I think it's a big deal to people for a good reason. It's another year where, yeah, they are. I think if you ask me right now, are the Sounders going to make the playoffs? Or the Sounders going to kind of get this turned around and go into the playoffs feeling like they have a pretty good shot at winning it all? I think probably yes. I think they probably will. I think that this season, when we look back on it, is going to probably be, a perfectly respectable year when all is said and done. But it's another year where they aren't doing it consistently for the whole year, that they're not in the Supporters Shield race, that they don't look like one of the elite teams in the league, game in and game out. And I understand why people want that for this club. This is a big club in MLS with a lot of resources, and I understand that people want that. They want that sort of day-to-day, week-to-week relevancy and domination, and it ain't going to happen this year. And we are, 4 games in, 5 games if you want to be fully honest about it. And they're already, like you said, out of the Shield race, most likely, and it's. I know that getting it turned around is probably going to involve some soccer that's not that great, right? Like, I think that this is a team as constructed that can win a decent amount of games by being really defensively solid and controlling tempo and controlling possession, and they can score just enough to win these games. And I think there's a good chance that they're going to make an impact attacking signing in the summer that could make them a more exciting team going forward, but it's still going to be kind of a grind. And I think when you look at these first 4 games, you were talking about how easily this could have been 7 points. Acknowledging the absences that they've had, the injuries that they've had, the difficulties that they've had in that regard, I think the expectation for this team should be, if you're playing Austin and Colorado at home, you need to be able to get 3 points from those games. You need to be able to grind out 3 points from those games. I don't care who's missing, and same playing San Jose on the road. You need to be able to get a point from San Jose on the road. I don't care who you're missing. And they're not doing that, and they haven't been doing that for a while.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think think what you're kind of saying is, even when these players come back, you do expect, when some of these, like, they might be better against the Galaxy. That, I think that's not a crazy, they could get a point there. They might win this game, right? It would not be the craziest thing in the world. I'm not necessarily predicting that, but those kind of things happen. I really am expecting this team to be better than they've been, which is a pretty low bar. But it still doesn't really excuse this start. And I think I get that feeling. I think that's feelings very pervasive. And I don't really blame anyone for feeling that. I think the difference is, like, what do people want to do about it? And that we can get into that later. But you did some research that I want to give you a chance to highlight. But you went back and looked at some longer term trends.
Yeah, because I think that's the key thing to sort of sussing out why this feels a little different than other swoons that the team has had over the years. Since the start of 2022, which is obviously the first year the Sounders ever missed the playoffs, CCL aside, and that pains me to say because it's a huge part of the context, but just talking about the league, right? Since the start of 2022, the Sounders are playing at a 1.33 points per game pace, which is good enough for 45 points over a season, which is, I think, almost always going to be enough to get you into the playoffs, but certainly not setting the world on fire, right? They're averaging 1.3-ish goals a game, plus 8 goal difference, and that's over 72 games. If you take out the first 7 games of last season, when the Sounders looked like they were setting the world on fire, so everything up to that Portland game,
capped by the St. Louis, the win over St. Louis.
Yes, yep, the win over St. Louis that really felt like, oh, this is a Supporters Shield winning team.
Yes.
Since then, 1.26 points per game. That's a 43-point pace. Not that much lower, but less than a goal per game. -6 goal difference. So that's not great, and it hasn't been great for a while. And I think to bring CCL back into the conversation, I think a lot of people were willing to overlook things in 2022, missing the playoffs, being pretty uninspired, because they won the biggest trophy in club history, because there were a lot of reasons that explained why it was tough to get back into the grind of the league after getting there. But it's continued, right? It got better at points last year, but for 2 full years now, this is a team that's playing at a 7th seed in the playoffs pace,
right,
and not scoring goals. They were.
I think that's a big part of it. I think that's really what it comes down to. Is
yes,
I think people can. It's frustrating to watch your team be mediocre, or it's harder to watch your team be bad. But when you layer in the number of boring games and the relative lack of scoring, that's where that's where I think you start to get this level of real frustration. I don't know. Like, I think the thing that's tough, and this is where maybe people are going to get frustrated with us, is I don't know how to fix this in the short term. I mean, on some level, yeah, getting back some of these injured players is going to help. It might help a lot. I don't know. We'll see. Like there is, in 2018, when they started really, really badly, they only won 3 of their first 15 games, I think is what it was. I'd have to go back and look for sure, but they were on pay. They were going to miss the playoffs in 2018. Yep. Then they brought in Raul Ruidiaz, and they went on this amazing run. In fact, they had the best second half in MLS history, I believe. Maybe the best single. They went 15-2, I believe, is what it ended up. Or is that right?
Yeah, one of the longest winning streaks in the league history, I think.
10, yeah. They won 10 in a row, I believe, or maybe they won 9 in a row. But whatever, they went on this amazing run. But they, it wasn't just because they got Raul Ruidiaz back. There was some other elements that helped there, but that was a big part of it. And I suppose it's possible that when Pedro de la Vega, they are going to get Pedro de la Vega back, and that will be like a new signing, although he is technically a new signing.
Yeah.
So there are genuine possibilities for, even if they don't make a DP level signing in the summer, there are kind of those kinds of talents that will be coming in. Albert Rusnak returning is, I realize that doesn't necessarily feel like a DP signing, but I mean, he is a DP. I would imagine he'll help. So on some level, I do think things are going to get a little bit better, but there is this sort of underlying issue that still feels like it needs to be addressed. Even if, I guess my point is, even if things turn around and this team finishes, let's just say they get back on they finish with 50 points this season, which would not totally shock me. We will still be sort of stuck. I guess what I'm saying is, how do we break out of this cycle where it's struggle. Okay, we did enough. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah. And it's, for me, I think you hit the nail on the head in saying that figuring out how to fix this is the tough part. And there have been a lot of times in the history of this team where they were struggling and it was difficult to figure out what the problem was. I think in this case, it's really simple to know what the problem is. The problem is the Sounders don't have anyone that is capable of creating chances, and they don't have forwards who are capable of creating their own or scoring goals out of nowhere. Raul used to be capable of that. I think he's lost just enough where he just doesn't have it to do that routinely. I think Jordan Morris is a very good forward, and I think he's a solid 9. And I think in a team that's creating chances, he'd have scored a decent number of goals, but they don't have the creation, and he's not able to do it on his own. How you fix that with the players that you have is is a difficult challenge. It's not changing the formation. It's not as simple as that. I think a lot of people want to think that there are easy answers, that there are obvious answers to how you fix this, and I just don't think that there are. This team has a lot of good players, and right now the players that are available are not necessarily complementary. And I think that that's really the crux of the issue. They've got a lot of guys that can put in a shift, that would be really important players in a good team that had somebody that could carry the creative load. And right now this team doesn't. I think Rusnak coming back is going to help a lot. Joao Paulo coming back is going to help a lot. God knows De La Vega coming back is going to help a lot. But it still feels like they're just missing that little bit more to make them capable of being really, really special, at least in the attacking phase. I think defensively, they're still about as good as
I still feel good. Even though they had a tough game against San Jose, I still holistically feel good about them defensively. Yeah. Yeimar was making his first start. He had a couple big mistakes in this one.
Yep.
I thought he got, he was definitely out of position on the second goal. He had a couple other rough, he had a couple other rough moments, but that was the big one. Jackson Reagan got, exposed, I think we can say, a couple times. But even then, I don't know if that was necessarily a surprise, because part of what makes him good, that's why he's paired with Yeimar, is that Yeimar is able to do more of the physical stuff, and it's usually don't end up with Jackson Reagan on an island like he was, certainly like on the third goal. But I think these pieces will fit together defensively. Yeah. I wouldn't mind, some changes on the back line, but I think the pieces I'm satisfied that once they're kind of get together, that they'll be defensively solid. But the offense is a tough one. Christian Roldan so far has not looked like, his pre-concussion self. Since, and that goes back a long way. Like you said, Jordan Morris, I think, is a perfectly capable number 9, but he needs service to be effective, and he's not getting it right now. I think in the short term, I think I'm ready to see him back out on the left wing, especially while they don't have and I think that's probably going to be the answer for the time being, because they don't have Leo Chu, they don't have Pedro de la Vega. If you don't have either one of them, who else are you going to put on the left wing? Yeah. Christian Roldan played out there last week. That did not strike me as a particularly good answer. Dylan Tevez was, I don't know. I thought Tevez was okay. He's not the reason they lost the game, but he certainly wasn't a plus player.
Yeah.
So it's so I think the short-term solution is probably moving Jordan Morris back out to the wing, and then crossing your fingers that Raul Ruidiaz can stay healthy, or maybe Danny Musovski is, I suppose Musovski could also potentially play out on the left if they needed it. I looked at his numbers. He actually has quite a few. He hasn't played out there a ton, but he's been pretty productive when he has played out there. But so there are some potential answers on the roster. It's just, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting. I'd like the ride to change a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think too that, Jordan moving to the left, Jordan is not a creator. I think it's fair to say that. Although, it's not like he's like a horrible crosser of the ball or anything, but he's going to go at goal. He's going to cut inside, and that's how he's going to be dangerous. But I do think that his presence out there, I think he can stretch the field a little more effectively out wide. I think that Raul just looks a lot more comfortable playing as a solitary striker. Even if I worry about him doing that at this phase in his career, what other options do you have really at this point? As much as I don't think Musovski has looked bad, or at least as bad as some people think he has. I was encouraged by the goal he scored against San Jose.
I thought he looked really good against San Jose. Yeah. I don't think he had done enough before that to have a feeling about him, frankly.
Right.
He had just been sort of on the field. He hadn't been very active.
Yeah, but I agree. I think he looked good against San Jose, but I still think Raul is probably the right choice, at least to start, because the odds of him going 90, I think, are pretty low, especially if he's playing by himself. But I think that LA on the road is a situation where maybe Jordan is able to get in behind a little bit more, right? Like he hasn't had a ton of those chances this year, and I think it's going to be easier for him to get that space and for his teammates to find him. I think most importantly, if he's playing out on the wing. So I do think that there are reasons to maybe be hopeful for this game. But I think it's obvious that something pretty drastic has to change with this with this attack, whether it's formationally, tactically, shifting guys around, whatever it is. We know that what we've been doing is not going to work. I think it's fair to say at this point.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that has been frustrating about Brian Schmetzer, and I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this going like, you guys aren't saying the thing that I want you to say right here. I'm not ready to throw Brian Schmetzer to the wolves at this point, but I will say that he needs to be more open to change. I think he is, he even said it today. I asked him because he had said after the game, I'm not ready to make any drastic changes. And I understand where he's coming from, but I asked him well, what's it going to take for you to want to make those drastic changes? And he kind of slow plays it if guys aren't playing up to their potential, then maybe I start pulling them. And basically he's saying if the effort's there, that's not going to change his hierarchy of player evaluation. And I don't know if that's going to make a lot of people feel great about his willingness to change, because on some level there needs to be some change for the sake of change, just to give it a different look, I had suggested maybe starting Cody Baker instead of Alex Roldan on the right, not necessarily because it's all Alex Roldan's fault, but because Baker seems capable of doing some things that we haven't seen from Alex yet this year. Alex, I thought Alex was pretty bad against San Jose. He wasn't the only one, but I don't think, I know one of the other common suggestions is moving Christian back into the defensive midfield. And my argument there is, I think the drop off from Christian Roldan to Danny Leyva, if we accept that Christian Roldan is a potentially better pairing in the double pivot, is smaller than the drop off from Christian to whoever you're going to play on the right. Presumably, I guess you could play Alex out there, you could play Dylan out there, you could play Rothrock, but I know a lot of people were all clamoring to see more of Rothrock, but he played a decent number of minutes in the San Jose game. He didn't do much with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, I really hope Brian is more open, that he's more open-minded to change than he has kind of indicated to us.
Yeah, I think that's been a consistent criticism we've had of Brian for a few years. And I think it's a criticism most coaches get when times get tough, is that they have their guys and it takes a lot for their guys to not be their guys anymore. And, I appreciate the point about I want to see the effort, and if the effort's there, I'm not going to bench my guys. But this is a results business. This isn't an effort business.
Right.
If this were an effort business, Mike Fucito would be a Hall of Famer.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not trying to throw strays at Mike Fucito, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Instead, Dimitar Berbatov is a legend, right? So you've got to play the guys that are going to get you results. You have to do it.
Yeah, I will also note that if there is some hope, I'm looking at the Galaxy's record here, and they are undefeated. They're 2-0-3. They have given up, though, 7 goals in their past 3 games. On the road against Nashville, at home against St. Louis, and on the road against Sporting Kansas City. I think they are a team that has some vulnerabilities. Let's just say they're a very fun team to watch, though. They're flying up and down the field, and they're scoring lots of goals. They got 12 goals in 5 games, and this guy Pansel that they just signed is the kind of guy I know Sounders fans would have loved to have signed. I think the jury is still out on the other DP that they brought in this last offseason, but I don't know. It'll be an interesting one. And I just hope that the Sounders give us something a little bit more fun to talk about, frankly. Like,
yeah.
it's a bummer for us to keep feeling like we're banging the same drum.
It is. And I do think that there's a mental issue with it. There has to be for the players, where maybe getting a couple of goals against San Jose, maybe finally getting a goal from the run of play,
right,
helps take some of the pressure off of it. Considering the way the game turned out, I don't know if that will actually end up happening. But this does feel like a game where even if they don't win, and I think that's a tall order at this point. And I would think it was a tall order even if they were playing relatively well, just based on how good the Galaxy have looked this year. If they can go in and do what teams should expect to do against the Galaxy, which is score a goal or two and not get shelled, and their defense can play up to its potential, I'd feel pretty good about that, even if it's a loss, right? Like, this isn't a game that I feel like they have to win. They've got some of those coming up, to be sure.
Yeah, they've got, I would say, so I was looking at their schedule. I'd say they need to get probably 10 points from their next 5 games, which still doesn't put them in a great position, but at least I think that's like, there are definitely points. They need to start collecting points, and they've got a few home games coming up. Like the Montreal game which is at home after the Galaxy game. That's as close to a must-win game as they're gonna have.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which, by the way, I probably won't be here to record after that game. I'm going to Hawaii, so see you suckers.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
No,
so
I'm happy for you. That is nice.
Yeah. No, I'm sure our listeners are really stoked for me too. They want what's best for me. I'm sure. But all right. Well, let's just call this a segment. We don't have enough questions to do a full mailbag episode, but there were a couple questions that got sent in that I feel like are worth doing a little segment on. So we'll come back and we're going to do a second segment like the old times where we answered some questions from listeners, but you're listening to Nos Audiatis. Welcome back to Nos Audiatis. So we decided to do a throwback episode on the fly. I didn't even tell Aaron I was going to do this, but we got a handful of questions. Not even a handful. We got like 3 or 4 questions. So I'll just go ahead and start. And I'll ask you this one.
Oh, good.
This question is called Hot Seat, and it's from the list. And I will remind people that the way we do questions these days is we just take them off our Discord. And if you want to be on our Discord, you got to be a supporter or higher on Sound at Heart. You'll get access to our Discord, where there's a lot of fun. There was like 1,000 over 1,000. There's like 1,200 comments on our game thread. It's like, it's popping in there. If you're missing out, if you're not in our Discord, you are missing out. But anyway, so the question is titled Hot Seat, and it's from the list. And he says, how hot is Brian's seat right
now? I think it's as hot as it's been, I would say. I can't imagine that it has been worse.
I thought to me it felt like it was getting hot last summer when things were really spiraling last year. It felt like he might be in real trouble.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair. I would imagine that last summer plays into how hot it is right now as well. I mean,
exactly. That's a good point. It's compounding.
Brian has there's this, I think this conception, this belief among some people that Brian has not been fired already because, he's been with the club so long and he's a nice guy and we won the CCL and isn't that nice. But realistically, Brian has not been fired because he's won the 3 most important trophies in club history. He's the only coach to win a trophy with the Sounders that's not a U.S. Open Cup or a Supporter Shield. So he's won MLS Cup twice, CCL.
And again, this doesn't matter, but I will note he also won 2 USL titles. Yeah. Which makes him the only coach in American history to win both an MLS and USL title. I don't think that factors into this at all, by the way. I just felt like that was a fun note.
It is a fun fact. But I think it could potentially, because I mean, he and Adrian have this working relationship that goes back a long way. And that all of that is going to factor in, right? And I think that Guy has had success. Guy has struggled and shown an ability to turn it back around and get more success.
Yes.
That's going to earn you an even longer leash. I think
Right.
that Brian has earned every bit of trust and every bit of time that he's gotten. I don't think that Brian is, and this is not based on anything other than how I feel. I would be shocked if anything happened before the summer, unless things just
Yeah.
really spiral, right? Like if they
Yeah.
lose their next 3 games or something, I think that might change things. But I think otherwise, if they're just mediocre, I think he's going to be in real trouble, if this kind of keeps up until the summer. But I think it's reasonable. I want him to turn it around more than anything. I love the man. I think he's a great coach. I don't think he gets enough respect or credit from a lot of people in American soccer, and frankly, a lot of people in this fan base. I don't think his success is an accident, and I want him to be able to go out on his own terms. But this is a results business, and the results have not been there for a while. And it's a standard he helped set, right? Like it's a real hoisted on your own petard situation. But it just hasn't been acceptable for a little bit. So yeah, I guess the simple answer to the question is probably
Getting hotter.
Yeah, getting hotter. Probably hotter than
Yeah.
you'd be comfortable with if you've got like heated seats in your car, but it's not on fire yet.
Yeah, I'll just add one more note. The other thing I've heard is that the only reason he was brought back was I've heard it said a few times, there was no way he wasn't going to be brought back for the 50th season, and they would never fire him during the 50th season. And while there's like some vague truth to that, I think the thing that's the worst thing to do would be to just accept that the 50th season is a disaster.
Right.
Like, and I will remind everyone, as much as we are frustrated as observers of this team or fans of this team, Adrian Hanauer, like really, at least from my experiences with him, he lives and dies with this team just like anyone else does. Like he gets up and screams when things are going well. He throws shit when things are going badly. Like he's not enjoying this either. And I think the only thing worse than firing your coach during a season like this would be not, if it gets to a certain point, like it will just become, it will have to happen, because that's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine them doing all this 50th anniversary festivities without Brian, but it's also hard to imagine them doing it while the season is completely spiraled out of control.
Right. And Brian having to put on a good face when he knows he's a dead man walking,
Right.
That's not good for anybody. Yeah. I think too, there's this perception of Adrian as not having the chutzpah or the I don't want to say balls, because that's not good, but just he doesn't have it in him to fire Brian. And I don't have that impression of Adrian. I'll just say that.
I don't either.
Yeah, he's a man that's had a great deal of success in business, and I think that people should keep that in mind.
Which is to say, I don't think either one of us are saying that is now, but I guess what I'm just saying is, like, there will come a point where it doesn't matter what we say as these things go. I'm just kind of level setting what I think people should expect.
Yeah.
All right. You want to ask the next one?
Yeah. This is the one I thought you were going to ask me, which is, would have been tough for me to answer. This one is from NFID 7606. What is it like covering the team and, I assume, forming some sort of working relationship with players and coaches, and then having to be critical of their performance? What kind of blowback or unwillingness to engage occurs, or is everyone understanding if that's part of being a professional?
Well, luckily, my experience has been pretty good. I think I'm also, like, I'm certainly cognizant of the fact that everything I write or say could potentially come back to me. Like, I'm not secretive about this stuff, and I'm doing it in a public space. And so, yeah, I am sometimes more careful about what I say than like a random like a random person who doesn't go out to training on a regular basis. But I think I'm willing to be critical of the team. I think when things go wrong, they understand that things are going to be like, there's no value in like pretending things are good when they're not. Right. And people understand that. And I, every now and then like last year, I heard Nico Lodero was mad at me because of some tweet I said. And, you know, that's how it is. But no one's ever like come up to me and confronted me and like tried to pick a fight with me or anything like that. And the Sounders, I will say, are pretty understanding of sort of like, just today we were actually out at training and I was talking to the press officer and he basically said, I think it's good when there's like bump and run coverage, to use like an NFL term or a football term. It's like, I don't want, you know, it shouldn't be, the press shouldn't be like 5-10 yards off, you know, every game. Like there should be some, you know, when there's tough stories to write, we expect you guys to kind of push us on those. And, you know, I also say that the way you do this for, you know, I've been covering the Sounders now for 14 years. I think this is my 14th season covering the Sounders. Like, you do have to be cognizant that you have relationships with these people. And so if I'm running around every week saying, fire the coach, cut the players, like that's not a way to keep that going very long.
Yeah. And I would say that's not really your role.
No,
right?
I don't think it is.
Like, you have opinions and you, I think, I'm not trying to fillet you here, but I mean, I think you do a good job of making your opinions known in a professional way without like, your job is to report on the team.
Yes.
And I think people want reporters to be like bulldog muckrakers sometimes because it would make them feel better. But like, I don't know who that really serves.
Well, it's no one that has to show up to the press conference every day. And I think a lot of times what people want is for us to yell at, like to yell at the coaches or players the way that they want to yell at them. And they don't have the access. And so and I can understand why people want that, but it's just not, I don't see that as my role. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer cross-examining a witness. You know, I'm a reporter that's trying to get information that I think will help people understand what's going on. And sometimes tough questions have to be asked. And I like to think that I am willing to ask those tough questions, but I can't make the answers be the answers you want them to be, you know, like that's just how it is. So this one, we also had a question from Twitter that wasn't necessarily intended for the show, but I think it was a good question for this. It's from Aaron Bregel. And he says, when can we blame Longacres for the injuries? I think he was joking kind of.
I think but it's like, I mean, correlation does not equal causation, but it can imply correlation can imply causation, and it's notable how many injuries they've had.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and in all seriousness, a lot of the injuries haven't even happened at Longacres.
Sure,
but it does feel there is a definite irony that they have all this state-of-the-art equipment and they're training on grass and they're doing all the stuff. They've pretty much always trained on grass, which I don't know if people knew, but they have. And like, but there's all these things that the Sounders finally have that people have thought that they wanted. And this is when it's all sort of like going to shit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it feels like this is a soccer-wide problem, and I think it's because players are just expected to play too many games in too many minutes at a very high tempo. I think that explains almost all of it, but it does feel particularly onerous this year.
I mean, and the thing is that's tough, and this is what does make it tough, is that most people, when you ask them about injury proneness or whatever, they will say, look, the trainers can help with things like recovery and prevention from muscle injuries. That's what their entire gig. That's their whole job, right? That's
Right.
what they're trained to do. And so if there's a bunch of muscle injuries, you can sort of narrow down and go, oh, there must be something what we're doing with our training or whatever. And there have been a fair number of muscle injuries. Pedro de la Vega's got a muscle injury. Reed Baker Whiting does a very kind of weird one where they're having a hard time getting that. Bradilia Rodriguez has a muscle injury. Stephen Fry had a muscle injury, although apparently hamstring injuries in goalkeepers are not very common because they don't use the same. That's like more of a running muscle,
Right.
I guess is my understanding of it. So there definitely have been muscle injuries, but most of these injuries have been kind of fluky, weird ones, like Albert Rusnak, who never gets hurt, spraining his ankle,
Yeah.
or Obed Vargas getting a concussion, or Leo Chu and this new, his knee thing, or João Paulo's hip, or these are not necessarily things that trainers can fix. Now, some of them you can argue are maybe broader issues with the way that they are treating, like the more the medical staff, I suppose. It's possible. I don't, I'm not an expert in these things, but my point is that there is some genuine bad luck going on here.
Yeah. I think that anytime there's a major injury crisis, that is the explanation, almost certainly. Because I feel like, yeah, they've gotten hit by a lot of hamstring and muscle injuries all at once, but I don't feel like that's super uncommon. Like, it just seems like that's just kind of the deal with soccer. And sometimes they're just going to get grouped together in ways that are unfortunate. But when you have something like this, there's got to be some fluky stuff going on. And I think that,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you also have to, you do sort of have to, if we're taking a serious look at it, you have to take a wider view. And I asked some people who are in this business who would have the data, and what they told me is the Sounders are definitely not the least injury prone team. They're probably a little bit below average, but they're within the range of pretty normal for MLS injury rates, muscle injury rates, as well as not just number of players, but the number of games that they miss. I can't remember the exact number, but I think what I was told by this person is the average team loses 15 players a year to hamstring injuries, basically. So it's like every team feels like they are like hamstring FC, right?
Right.
And if you're not, then you're one of the lucky ones. But I don't know. There's definitely an irony. I don't know I don't think you can really blame it on anything that's happening at Long Acres, but I'm sure it isn't lost on anyone that it's a frustrating coincidence at the very least.
maybe this is all just the Sounders committing the sin of pride by buying this new facility and,
Right.
changing their logo, and
Exactly.
that must be
Yeah.
it. That's the most plausible explanation, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's
God is
definitely
angry at the Seattle Sounders.
right. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, we, I think that's our show. I will say one other news item. Hey, the union refs are back.
Yes, thank God.
CSRA and Pro came to an agreement. I can't say that I still don't understand why MLS did this. Why they played 5 weeks without union refs just to end up giving them more money.
Right.
I can't imagine they did not save any money. I guarantee it.
Their only real win in terms of negotiation was the refs didn't get quite everything they were looking for in like travel reimbursements or something like that, right?
Yeah, that was the big thing. Like they did, and which I think to me always struck me as sort of like a sacrificial lamb. Like,
Right.
yeah, we want to fly on coach, or we want business class everywhere we go.
Yeah, that definitely feels like
That up.
that definitely feels like a pro lawyer being like, you have to give us something, please. I gotta be able to work in this town again,
Right.
It is funny though, because I thought that the ref in the last game, I mean, he was still dog shit, but I did think he was the best one of the replacement refs.
Yeah. I mean, I I don't think the penalty call was a little soft, and I didn't really think the offside, like, to me, the offside was not clear and obvious enough. Like, to me, it looked like it might have been offside. Yeah. But you're right. I think he got the big call. The big calls. I think he was mostly right.
And wasn't the VAR ref Geiger?
Yes, it was.
So you can't even really, because he's the one that said, "Hey, you should take a look at this," right? And if he's saying you should take a look at this, his opinion is that it was worth taking a look at. So
I will say I appreciated how quick the review was.
Yeah,
and I think the refs, I actually think the ref, this is how it should be, is if VAR is recommending a change, especially for an offside that is theoretically black and white, you have to be able to trust VAR to get that right.
Yeah.
Why are you calling the ref over to confirm? Like, okay, if you say he's offside, okay, like, I trust you. You've been looking at this longer than I have. If you're saying it's on, then it's on. Fine. Like, and so in that way, I thought they handled it well. This is the guy who's the DJ, I think, though, right?
He looked like it. I hadn't heard that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, because I think he called the Galaxy Miami game the first. So I'm pretty sure that's the guy who was the DJ.
Well, I hope he never works as a ref again, but he did an okay job.
And with that, that's a good note. I think that's a good note to end on. I am Jeremiah Shan. Thank you to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines. Thank you to all of our paid subscribers. We are on our way to 2,500 paid subscribers, if you can believe that. Which is a crazy number to be getting to at this point in the season. But with all that said, I'm Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is No Studietis. And remember, you will never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.